Hello, thank you for joining us today and welcome to the ESHA webinar for menu label and composite ingredients and calorie ranges for menus. My name is Ben. I'm joined by Alicia. We're going to go over all of that information today. The information that we always go over every webinar, ESHA Research was established in 1981 as the first comprehensive nutrition analysis software solution. Today ESHA has a large suite of software, including the Genesis R&D suite, food and supplements applications, the food processor, and our consulting services. Today, we're going to look at the Genesis Food application. Genesis Food was released in 1991 and is designed to help users manage processes and industry challenges, meet federal requirements, nutrition labels, menu analysis, reporting, and regulatory compliance. And of course, for today, we'll be focusing primarily on that menu labeling and restaurant regulations. We have a few upcoming webinars here. On June 27th, we're going to be looking at the Mexican regulations and complying with those. With the newest version of Genesis, version 11.5, we included the new front of pack label for Mexico. So going through that and just kind of the overall regulations within Mexico and their labeling laws. And then on July 11th, we're going to be looking at converting your labels from 2003 to 2016 Canadian regulations. So we did one of these webinars very similarly for the United States, I believe in 2016, maybe early 2017, that you can watch if you're in the United States and you want some sort of information like that. But if you're in Canada, we're going to be doing that for converting over and then different nutrients that are available, things like that. Please note, as always, this webinar is being recorded. We'll send you out a recording right after it's over, likely today. And all of our past webinars and future webinars are available on our website. So if you want to view the past ones or sign up for the future ones, that should be available right on our website. And if you have any questions during the webinar, please enter them into the window that you see for GoToMeeting or GoToWebinar, sorry. If you think of a question, make sure you put it in right away. We have people sitting ready to answer those questions right now. If you wait until the webinar is concluded and we're starting to do our Q&A section of the webinar, it's a good chance we'll kind of get cut off before we can get to all of those. So ask those questions as we go. If there is something we don't get to, we'll certainly follow up with you, or you can reach out to our support or nutrition teams for any sorts of questions. Today's agenda. Again, we're going to be looking at menu labeling guidance overview. Alicia is going to go over a lot of that information on things that we've gotten some updates on and just the overall regulations. And then we're going to look at some of the information inside of Genesis. We're going to look at the brand new composite ingredients section of Genesis, the calorie ranges in the label menu report, the menu label report in general. We're gonna take a look at creating a couple of menus, how it can be used, things like that, and then we'll look at some ingredient yield examples. We have a brand new yield in Genesis, so we'll look at that in a few minutes as well. With that, I'll hand things over to Alicia. She's going to go through some of the regulatory pieces before we get into the actual application.
Thanks, Ben. So May 7th, 2018 marked the compliance date for U.S. menu labeling regulations. As part of the Affordable Care Act, and restaurants and other food establishments must provide consumers with access to nutrition information. Also on May 7th, 2018, the FDA released the latest related guidance titled Menu Labeling Supplemental Guidance for Industry. Some of the key points from this supplemental guidance include calories from fat, examples of self-service signage, front-of-pack calories declaration for grab-and-go items, succinct statement and statement of availability clarification, further designation between menus and marketing materials, specific points on pizza, and more comments on alcohol. I'll highlight a few of these. Please refer to the latest supplemental guidance as well as previous guidance for specific examples and scenarios. Much of the menu labeling guidance is presented in Q&A format, so it's fairly friendly to review. Also, we have a previously recorded webinar from earlier this year that is dedicated to menu labeling and speaks greatly to the regulations, so please take a look at that. As a very brief refresher of some key definitions from the menu labeling regulations, Covered establishments are restaurants and similar retail food establishments that have 20 or more locations, are doing business under essentially the same name, and that does include franchises, offering for sale substantially the same menu items, and offering for sale restaurant-type foods. Note the and. Some establishments might meet some of these, but all of these conditions determine whether menu labeling is mandatory for an establishment. Establishments that don't meet all of these conditions may choose to voluntarily register with the FDA to be covered, and there's specific registration process outlined in the regulations. Standard menu items are restaurant-type foods that are routinely offered on the menu or as self-service items. Calories must be declared for standard menu items. Calories can be declared on menu boards or on menus. For standard menu foods on display or self-service foods, calories can be declared on signs adjacent to these items. Additional written information is required for standard menu items must be available upon request. A succinct statement concerning suggested daily caloric intake and a statement that the additional nutrient information is available upon request must also be present. In addition to calories, nutrient information available upon request includes calories from fat, total fat, saturated fat, trans fat, cholesterol, sodium, total carbohydrate, dietary fiber, sugars, and protein. We'll discuss calories from fat further, and there are exceptions for insignificant amounts. And note that this list of nutrients doesn't include the vitamins and minerals that we see on the lower portion of the nutrition facts label, neither on the 1990 nor the 2016 label formats. Highlights from the latest FDA guidance that we'll discuss here are calories from fat, calories presented on a front of pack sticker for grab-and-go items, combo meals, and alcohol. There are many more details and examples in the recent as well as previous guidance that will help you out. And again, if you missed our menu labeling webinar from earlier this year or need a refresher, visit the ESHA webinar archives or the e-learning center. Calories from fat is a required nutrient for the menu labeling regulations. Calories from fat was a mandatory nutrient on the 1990 NLEA labels for packaged goods. Calories from fat is no longer a reported nutrient on the 2016 labels for packaged goods. Some establishments might use a nutrition facts panel in the 2016 format, or may be working with the 2016 set of nutrients to meet the menu labeling requirements. Therefore, if a covered establishment lists all of the other required information but omits calories from fat, the FDA does not intend to take action against that establishment. And note that in Genesis, calories from fat is a calculated field. The 2016 labels in Genesis will not include calories from fat, but it is still available as a nutrient, and it can be included in your nutrients to view. It can be reviewed on reports like the spreadsheet and multi-column, and it is included in the menu label features. A covered establishment can list calories on a sticker on grab-and-go items. If using a front of pack calorie sticker, the calories must be declared for the entire package, and this is in line with reporting calories for a full serving on a menu board. Nutrition facts labels can also meet the menu labeling requirements of grab-and-go foods. If combinations of menu items are offered and each individual item is already listed with calories on the menu and in the same size as that offered on the combo, then duplicate calories information need not be listed for the combo. However, if your combo offers a size of a menu item not already listed, then you need to list the combo's items calories information. You could see like a half a sandwich versus a whole sandwich. You need to have information for both. Hey, cheers! What happens if you have alcoholic beverages that are standard menu items and you need to declare calories and provide other nutrition information, but you don't have the nutrition information for those items? Suppliers may not readily provide nutritional information for alcoholic beverages because alcohol is regulated differently than packaged goods and ingredients. So you want to reach out to your suppliers and request the nutrient information. It's likely they are aware of the new laws and they're trying to figure out how best to address them just like you are. Ask them what they can provide and ask them for confirmation or clarification as needed. So if your supplier provides you with calories, you might have them confirm other nutrient content and confirm insignificant or zero values if they can. As part of the reasonable basis definition for nutrient information reported, the guidance mentions that there are several acceptable methods to determine nutrient content of foods for menu labeling. These include using database information, specifically the USDA SR data, and that's included in Genesis. Calculation methods established by the Tax and Trade Bureau, obtaining lab analysis, or using other reliable means to arrive at your values. The guidance also states, as part of a reasonable basis, considering the ingredients and processing, is it reasonable to expect that the alcoholic beverages would be void of particular nutrients, like fat and cholesterol, deeming those reportable as zero? And you want to document your sources and approaches for the values that you report. Again, there's much more regulatory information covered in the FDA supplemental and previous guidance for menu labeling, as well as in our recorded menu labeling webinar. And I know I've made this point a few times, but I just want you to know that we have additional helpful resources for you. Now we'll switch gears to Genesis and features that can help you navigate the requirements of menu labeling. Introduced in Genesis version 11.5, the composite ingredient feature allows you to average multiple items to create a new ingredient. In the menu labeling regulations, the FDA indicates that nutritional values should come from a reasonable basis. The FDA also says the calorie and other nutrient declarations could be based on the average values obtained when comparing nutrient values of the food from different suppliers or from the same supplier when variations are known. The composite ingredient features might be used if you have lab analysis of produce items where natural variation of growing seasons and conditions can result in different nutrient information. You could create an average item. Or if you have a number of suppliers for essentially the same ingredient or food item, and you need to create an average item from these, you could use the composite ingredient feature to do so. A question came up regarding this. When is it appropriate to use the composite ingredient feature? Really, this is for you to determine, considering the menu items you serve and where and how you are posting your menu information, what offers an accurate representation of the items your patrons consume. We use the example of the hamburger bun just as an example of the feature, not necessarily a guideline. If you have multiple suppliers of hamburger buns that are served interchangeably, and for the most part have the same makeup of ingredients, but maybe the incidental ingredients like dough conditioners differ, then those may be good candidates for compositing. If some of your locations, however, consistently use a specific and different, maybe a locally sourced item, then it may be more appropriate to list that item separately. Some of these considerations may especially apply if you post menu information on a corporate website that is available to a broader audience and represents multiple regions. An example of what would not be appropriate is compositing 3 different types of buns, like a white bun, a whole wheat bun, and a gluten-free bun. That wouldn't really provide an accurate depiction and wouldn't really make sense. You want to use a reasonable basis and avoid misleading information. When you make selections for the composite ingredient, Genesis brings in equal amounts of each ingredient and shows 100 grams of your newly created composite ingredient. The detailed information is presented in a spreadsheet, and once you have created your composite ingredient, you can use that in a recipe just like any other ingredient. Ben, could you show us the composite ingredient features in Genesis, please?
Absolutely. Let's switch over into the Genesis software, and we'll go ahead and create a new composite ingredient. And then I built a recipe previously that was so we're going to use the hamburger bun example again. So we'll use create a composite ingredient that's a hamburger bun, and then I've created a cheeseburger in the past, and I'll replace my singular ingredient bun with my composite. So you start off, we'll do new composite ingredient, and that's just in that drop-down menu, whether you're doing new or open, or if you go to File, New or Open, Anywhere where you would find basically that drop down of recipe, ingredient, advanced label, food menu, menu label. Composite ingredient will now appear there as well. So new composite ingredient. A lot of this information will seem pretty similar, as of course a lot of the areas of Genesis, transfer over between ingredients, recipes, composite ingredients. So let's call it webinar, new hamburger bun, and hit OK. And then, looking at this window, it's going to look very similar to the recipe entry screen, and it really is kind of designed as a hybrid between an ingredient and a recipe. So when we're ready to add an ingredient into our composite ingredient, I'll just search for webinar because I know I've created some ingredients specifically for that. So we'll just do webinar hamburger bun 1. That's a ESHA ingredient from our database. Select that, add it in. We can also multi-select here. So if we know we're going to be able to do a search that comes up with a number of answers, see we got hamburger bun 1 through 5. I already added 1 in. Maybe I wanted to add 2 through 5 in. Just do a click, hold shift, click again to multi-select, or obviously control if you want to select one at a time. Just your standard Windows functions to multi-select here. Hit select. And it adds all of those items into our composite ingredients. Now we've got buns 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all in our composite all at one time. There is a checkbox next to each one of these. The checkbox will denote if that item counts inside of our composite anymore or not. So if we uncheck one of these items, you see the item now, that bun goes down to 0% factored into our composite ingredient. Now we have 1 through 4 are 25% each, so they equal a total 100%. If I recheck that, then it just adds back up to 100%. So you have 20% now between 5 items. So you can, if you're going to be changing out one supplier for another, if you have a supplier that you're no longer using, something like that, you can leave that item in your composite for historical information, but uncheck it so that it no longer is factoring into the analysis of the composite ingredient. As I mentioned before, a lot of the fields are going to look pretty similar. You got your notes fields down at the bottom here, notes 1, 2, 3. If we click edit the composite ingredient, we've got the name, common name, user code, nutrients, yields, and measures. If we wanted to add a yield and measure, we can certainly do that. It's not going to pull that information from the other ingredients that you've added in though, the yields and measures and the ingredient statement both. So the yield and measure you'll have to add in yourself. I would assume probably an average of all of those. So you have 1 each. If I can find each in here. There we go. 1 each is, say, 75 grams for a bun. That may be slightly off. Please don't judge me for my examples. If a bun weighs considerably more or less than 75 grams, again, it's just an example, not actual use case. So, and that's gonna be a lot of these pieces here. So, if some of my examples don't make factual sense in terms of creating an actual cheeseburger, that's okay. It's just for an example here. So the yields and measures won't pull through from the other ingredients. You'll have to enter those in for the specific composite ingredient. And then similarly with the ingredient statement, as Alicia mentioned, you may have 5 items that are all a bun that are all very similar. Maybe they have slightly different conditioners, things like that. As an application, Genesis does not want to assume anything about your ingredient statement. It doesn't want to assume that the first item you add in, that's the ingredient statement you want to use. It's really kind of down to you to determine how you'd like to state that ingredient statement as an average between all of them. So if you have any questions about that, we can certainly assist you on a one-on-one situation, but that's the idea, is this window will be blank. When you first create that composite ingredient, you'll then type in your information, and I'll just say, sample ingredients for my bun, because I'm not going to write too much stuff in here. So we've got that information in here now, but again, that's something you'll have to add in yourself. And similarly, a lot of these other fields, if you're making Canadian products that are packaged goods, you can do the is sugar item if that's an option for you. Of course, you can do notes, you can do file attachments, things like that. So all these fields are going to be the same. as an ingredient or a recipe would see in a lot of these cases. We'll go ahead and hit OK. We have our allergen statement. The allergen statement window will look very, very similar to the recipes allergen statement because it's really kind of working the same way. Like I said before, a lot of a hybrid between the two, ingredients and recipes. So with this, you'll see all of your ingredients that make up your composite here. You'll see what allergens are made up. All of these have gluten, all of these have wheat, none of them have anything else. Again, it's just an example. If most buns are made with egg, I just set these myself, so not a huge deal there, but you've got the allergens that are selected here inside of our composite. And then the spreadsheet report is the one report that we have for the composite ingredient that will show you some nutritional information on these items. So in this case, we can take a look at the nutrients. Some of these are missing a few of these values, but that's okay. We'll certainly be using it as an example though. But you see the average here. Again, you're looking at 20-gram value of your composite because it's, again, doing 20% because there's 5 of them. So you can view that report, make sure numbers make sense, make sure numbers add up. Obviously, in my case, make sure that there's no missing values, which there are a few in my case. And then once you've built your composite ingredient, there's just not a lot else to it here. We can save this ingredient, call it webinar, new hamburger bun, hit OK. And now we'll go ahead and close our composite ingredient, and I'm going to open up a recipe. I'm going to just call webinar. I have my webinar cheeseburger that I've built in the past. And with my cheeseburger, I just simply added in a hamburger bun, a slice of cheddar cheese, and 4 ounces of ground beef. So a very simple burger. But if we wanted to then go in, so there's going to be 2 different ways we could go about this depending on kind of how you want to replace. Obviously, we could just go into the search for box and type in to find the item we want to find. And for composite ingredients, always with Genesis, there has been the history of the different colors meaning different things. Light green items are ESHA ingredients, dark green items are user-created ingredients. In my case, every single one of my user-created ingredients is literally just a copy of an ESHA ingredient that I put the name word webinar in front of so that I could use them as examples. Purple are recipes, and then this light blue item are the new composite ingredients. So it's another color to see as you're searching through to find items. Like I said, when you want to add this item into your existing recipe to maybe replace your singular ingredient with a composite ingredient, we could just select that item, put in one each of the item, and now we have the composite ingredient and the standard ingredient. You can also do a search and a replace as well. So if I didn't want to do that, I'll go ahead and delete this item. If I wanted to go into the hamburger bun, I can right click on it and hit modify, and we can then search for what we want to replace it with up here. Search, find that same item, select. We still want 1 each, hit OK. And now we have replaced the existing ingredient with a new ingredient. So again, there's 2 different ways to go about that. It just kind of depends on if you want to be able to see them both in the recipe at the same time to maybe do a little bit of comparison, or if you just want to go in and replace one with the other when you create that composite ingredient. Again, a lot of that kind of resides on how you want to go about doing things. And then similar to a sub recipe inside of a recipe where it shows you the ingredients that make it up, you can do the same thing with that composite. So we got the plus sign next to this. We expand that out and it'll show us all 5 of those items, and it'll show you how much of that item is going into the finished recipe. So I added 1 each was 75 grams, so 20% of that is 15 grams. So it's going to show you how much of that item is factoring into the finished composite ingredient. You can do the same thing within reports of Genesis too. So if you look at like the spreadsheet report, we'll show you that same information. Obviously, you can expand or contract it. And inside of the composite ingredient, if you uncheck any of those ingredients in the composite ingredient itself, those will not show up here. So again, those are hidden. Those are really excluded from the composite ingredient. They're really, I almost said they're not part of it. They are part of it, but they're really not part of it at the same time. So they're really, kind of removed from any sort of analysis that you're going to see. I'll hand it back over to Alicia, and she'll go a little bit more on the, I think we're gonna go back over to the menu now.
Thank you. And Ben, thanks for pointing out some of those. Again, the color coding and similarities. You could bring a recipe within a recipe. You can bring a composite ingredient into a recipe, and so there are a lot of similarities there.
And one more thing I wanted to point out that I didn't, and I don't think I did on our last webinar either. Composite ingredients are made up of ingredients. You can't add a recipe in Genesis to a composite ingredient. It's going to be ingredients only, and you can't add a composite to another composite, stuff like that. So ingredients go into composite ingredients, and nothing else can go into it. I just want to make sure that that was pointed out as well.
Great, thanks for clarifying that. So the menu labels, we'll take a look at those. The menu label features in Genesis are designed to help you comply with menu labeling regulations. Just a note that the menu label features and report were previously called the food menu and food menu report. So if you hear reference to that in earlier webinars, it means menu label. If you see food menu rather than menu label options in your software, you may need to obtain the latest version of Genesis. If that's the case, check in with our sales team. The menu label features allow you to build your menu from recipes and ingredients that you've created and stored in your database. We use the term category to mean types of foods or sections of your menu, like appetizers, sides, entrees, beverages, etc. You can determine and add the categories you need to organize your menu and assign menu items to each category. It's likely that establishments have a fairly wide variety of items available, and the menu label might be approached in sections. So you might create one menu label for your sandwiches, another for sides, and yet another for frozen desserts, etc. There's certainly flexibility within these features. The menu label report shows your menu as you have organized it, and starting out displays the required menu label nutrients in rounded amounts. You can choose to display additional or alternate nutrients. This is driven by your set of nutrients to view. In addition to calories and the other required nutrient information, you can list prices, ingredient statements, allergens and characteristics like gluten-free, vegan, and others. And you can also export the menu label report. In some circumstances, like when you have menu items in 3 or more sizes or flavor varieties or combo meals that offer variations, you can list calories as a range on your menu board or menu. On the menu label report, you can choose to view and report the calories in ranges as you see on the slide here. Ben, will you please demonstrate menu label features?
Absolutely, and hopefully everyone has enough time to stick around. We may go a little bit over our 45 minutes total with Q&A, but that's okay. We're going to go back into the Genesis software now. I'm going to go ahead and close my cheeseburger recipe that I created. I'm going to save it though, so that we can use that as a item that we'll add into one of our menus in a few minutes. See how that kind of looks just as overall. So as Alicia said, there's a lot of different ways you can go about using the menu label, just depending on how big of a restaurant you are, how many different items you have. If you have hundreds or thousands of items in your menu, then maybe a few different menu labels in Genesis makes sense. If you have a fairly small, compact menu, then maybe just one makes sense. So if you ever have any questions or would like any advice, give us a call. We can always talk it out too. So we're going to go through creating a menu label now. I don't know if we've ever done that in any of our webinars before, so we kind of wanted to just go through the basics of creating a menu, and then I'll show you some of the different ideas that we have here. So new menu, and we'll just say webinar cheeseburger with side options. Oops, I think I spelled options right. Options, there we go. And hit OK. And then we'll get back into, again, just like all the other pieces of Genesis, an area that looks pretty similar to a lot of other things where you're searching to add items into our menu. First, we're going to start off with our webinar cheeseburger, the one that I just created a little bit ago. So webinar cheeseburger. What we're going to do with this menu is we're going to create a menu that includes a single main entree and all the different sides that could go along with that. So that's going to be our first menu that we'll create here. So when you add an item into the menu label, it's always going to go into this unassigned area, and it's always going to be added as the base measurement that it goes in. You know, if it's a recipe, it'll be 1 serving. If it's an ingredient and you have a measurement that goes along with that item, they'll go in that measurement. So it wants to quickly add that item into your menu without giving you a lot of prompts to change things if that's the way you want it, just kind of your base. If you ever want to change that though, you certainly have that option. So if I wanted to change my cheeseburger to a different measurement, we can right click on the item, hit modify. We can change it to, you know, in the case of maybe a soda, we wanted to say 16 ounces instead of small, something like that on our menu. So you have a lot of control here on exactly how it's stated. With this item, I'm just going to leave it as it is, because 1 serving, 1 cheeseburger. For the category, I mentioned before, when you add an ingredient or any item into your menu label, you can add ingredients, you can add recipes, you can add composites. Any of those items can go into the menu label. When you add those items in, it will by default go into this unassigned category. We can rename that unassigned category though, and in that case, an unassigned category will then take its place. And I'll show you exactly how that works in a moment. That might be a confusing way to state that, but basically, if we wanted to rename our category, just go into click on unassigned, right click on it, hit modify, and now we want it to just say cheeseburger or burger. If I can type today, that's okay. Hit okay, and now we have a menu that says, a category that says burger and has my cheeseburger underneath it. Now we'll add in a few more items. So I'm gonna add in some French fries. And you can add the same item to a menu repeatedly. And that's gonna be very important if you have something like French fries where you're gonna have small, medium, large. So you have French fries, select, maybe I wanna add that a few times. I'll find that a couple more times. So quickly add that item 3 times. Again, it went into that unassigned category. It created a new unassigned category. So if I add items to the menu, it gets put in that unassigned. If I then rename unassigned to French fries, or fries, that's a whole new category outside of unassigned. And now when I start adding more items in, they'll still keep going into unassigned. They won't like go into fries or anything like that. So we can do that really quickly and easily. That way you don't have to create the categories first. You can just add all the items you want and then just change that all those items to that one category. Makes it a little bit quicker and easier. And then as I mentioned before with our ingredients here or items here, with our fries, they're gonna come in as that initial measurement. So all my fries are currently 1 medium fry. We obviously don't want that. So we just go in, right click, modify. We want a small fry and we want a large fry. So now we've got our burger in its own category, we've got our fries, and now we'll maybe do some drink options. We'll just do 1 drink option from here just for our example. And then 1 more time. And again, we'll do small, medium, and large for our cola. I think I have small, medium, large. Oh, I don't have this for my cola. Let's see if I can find an item. I think I had lemon lime soda that had small, medium, and large. Sorry about that, everybody. I thought I had made sure that it was going to have a small, medium, and large, and I did not. So let's delete the colas for my example because they don't work great for my example. Sorry about that, everybody. And then let's add this lemon lime soda 1 more time. And I meant to do 1 small, and I definitely did 8 small, so let's fix that again. We'll do 1 small soda. We'll do 1 medium soda. And we can do 1 large soda. Another thing that you could do here is instead of separating those, you could go small, medium, large, and maybe have a combo where it shows maybe the fries and the drink at the same time. Again, a lot of that's up to how you want to design this. There's probably a million different ways you could go about building your menu. So I don't want to give you too many ideas that this is the only way to go about things. This is one way that you can build your menu. And again, I've mentioned at least twice already before, if you'd like some advice, if you have any questions, if you just want someone to talk to and want some advice, so long as you have an active subscription to Genesis, you have access to our support and our nutrition team. So give us a call. We're always here to help. And so this item we now have is, you minimize that back out, the burger. So we have our burger, we have our fries with the range of calories in the fries, and we have our unassigned, which obviously we want to be now just soda. Something like that, whatever we want to call it. So now we've got our 3 different categories for our burger with our fries, with our soda. And obviously in a real item, we'd have probably a lot more drink options than just the 3, but I'm not gonna sit here and waste an hour adding 400 different drink options that a lot of the restaurants out there have. And then once you've built your full menu, whether it's like this, whether you've got 20 different entrees that are available, you go into our menu label report and we can take a look at the nutritional information on it. And as Alicia said, there's a lot of options here inside of this report that you can do by default. And I'll change it back to the default because that's what it should be. By default, that label nutrients only checkbox will be shown. That will change based on the last thing that you did inside of that menu label. But if you have that label nutrients only checkbox checked, then it's going to show the rounded nutrients and only the nutrients for the label menu. So that's exactly what you're looking for that restaurant menu. And then you can choose to show or hide different pieces. I didn't assign a price to any of my items, but if I had, we have this price checkbox shown that will show all the prices. And then moving on, if there's any other pieces you'd like to show, you can show your allergens in a couple of different ways, either as a kind of true or false checkbox sort of option where we do allergens with, you see here some of these RX for the allergens existing, or we can have an allergen statement where it says contains whatever allergens it may contain. And then also item comments, and I didn't touch on that. Let me go back over to my menu so you can see what that actually entails. With our menu, if we right click on that item, we go into modify item, right where we changed the quantity and measure to, we can write some comments in. So if there was something, has an option of 1 or 2 dips or something like that for French fries, can come with up to 2 dipping sauces. Whatever you'd like to type in about that item, you can add that item there. And then in the report, you would have the option to show those comments or not show them if you wanted to. You have ingredient statements as well if you wanted to show the written out ingredient statement, and then also the characteristics, which would be things like vegetarian, vegan, gluten-free, organic, things like that. And that's all the pieces to that report. And then the other report is a little bit more, I don't like using the term rigid, but a little more rigid. It's kind of set to be what it is. It shows the information that it does, which is the label, the menu label nutrients rounded as they're supposed to be, with none of the coloring as well. So it's a little bit more basic so that you can just export that out really quickly and easily and put it into Excel, whatever you want to put it into. Another option that we would have, let's create one more menu. Hopefully we have enough time. Create one more quick menu. Hopefully that will be a little bit quicker. We'll save this one. Another idea that I think Alicia had mentioned was something like maybe a drink menu. So webinar drink menu. And in this case, we can add in, say, so we've got our lemon lime soda. We'll modify that over to being just called the soda category. I don't know if I mentioned it with the composite ingredient. You can multi-select items in this window too to add into your menu label. So if we wanted to add, say, I've got 2 different coffees here. I got coffee royale and coffee black coffee. So I clicked the wrong button there. You can select both of those items and it'll populate both of those right into my menu. You can then go modify this category for coffee, We'll see, what else did I create here? Milkshakes. Oops. And we have strawberry milkshake, vanilla milkshake, and I think I had one other. There we go, chocolate milkshake. Select, modify, milkshakes. And obviously there's a lot of other pieces you could do here if you wanted to separate the milkshakes to just the chocolate milkshakes and have a small, medium, large for an individual category. If you wanted to have, you know, all three flavors of milkshakes and 3 different sizes in one category, where it basically has 9 different items, 3 different flavors, 3 different variations of each flavor. Again, a lot of it just depends on how you'd like that to show up, how you'd like it to appear, how you want to create it inside of Genesis. So a lot of variation there, a lot of options that you have there. And with that, I'll hand it back over to Alicia. We'll take a look at, I think, one more piece that we can use.
All right, thank you. Thanks for demonstrating those variations, but as everyone can see, there is a lot of flexibility there. So it's really, how do you need to organize your menu items? And Genesis allows for so much. So another aspect of Genesis, the most recent version, per the menu labeling regulations, calories for self-serve beverages are to be declared in the amount of the full volume of the cup. Patrons might not choose to have ice, so the cup could potentially be filled to the rim with soda or other beverage from the self-serve station. On the other hand, if the establishment serves beverages to a standard fill line or a standard amount of ice, like at the drive-through, declared calories would take into account the standard fill and the ice added. Given that, some establishments may need 2 different sets of calories, for with ice and without ice, to accommodate these requirements.
And we've added it. Oh, sorry.
With the latest version of Genesis, we have added a yield description for with ice. This allows you to factor in the % of the volume that the ice occupies and reports the nutritional information per the soda in the served cup. Ben, could you show us that, please?
I certainly can. Sorry, I jumped in there a little early. She points at me for one thing, and I think it's a different one. So my mistake there. So with our soda, I'll go ahead and open this lemon lime soda. Use that one as an example. From within the menu label, if you wanted to open up an ingredient to actually view that ingredient there, instead of having to go to home, open ingredient, open that ingredient, if we right click on the ingredient, we do have the option to open that item as well. So we'll open up that lemon lime soda item here, and now we've got that ingredient open. Inside of the yields and measures area inside of Genesis, you can create yields. That's always been a function in Genesis. You can do, as purchased raw or any of those sorts of things. Towards the very, very, very bottom of this, measure dry, things like that. Very bottom of this list has with ice. That's a new thing that we've added in for version 11.5 of Genesis. We can select that and then determine how much basically of that item is not going to exist. So if we do say 25% refuse, that would mean if we say that there is 12 ounces of soda in our cup, then only 9 ounces of the actual soda would be used for nutritional component, assuming that 25% of it is a zero sum. It's just water or it's just ice. And in that case, we can then save this item. Okay. And now we can go ahead and I'll go back in and add our webinar lemon lime soda with ice. And now we'll see, let's make sure that we have the correct, say 8 ounces. I didn't add in a measurement on that one as well. So we'll make sure ounce weight is available for both. So we'll do 8 ounces of each one. And then when we look at the menu, let's put them together. Sorry about that. When we put them together, now we'll see that the nutritional content is different because one of them is 8 ounces, straight 8 ounces. One of them is 8 ounces, but 25% of the item is not being counted as nutritional content. It's being counted as basically refuse or being tossed away, or in this case, soda being replaced with ice.
Thank you. So you've got all this information in Genesis, and you need to bridge Genesis with ERP or PLM systems, your online menus on your website, your menu reader boards or other equipment. There are various ways to connect the data in Genesis to our other systems, either on a manual basis or an automated scheduled process. The Genesis API allows you to interface Genesis with other systems. We have a case study with Wegmans that illustrates the benefits in time, effort, and cost savings using the Genesis API to connect Genesis to their store scales. If you want to learn more about ways to connect and automate your systems with Genesis, contact our sales team. And if you want to modify, edit, click, and navigate the program as quickly as Ben does, but you need a little more help with that. If you or your team members need to learn more about Genesis in a hands-on classroom setting, we have several training sessions scheduled throughout the year. We have both professional and advanced level courses that cover uses of Genesis as well as labeling topics. Advanced training is happening next week at our Oak Brook location. Professional training occurs in Oak Brook in July as well, and in Orlando in August. And we have an advanced class in Oak Brook in mid-August. We also have offered training with specific focus on menu labeling features and topics. And if you find that you need that kind of training, contact our training team at training@esha.com, and they can help you set up a more customized approach.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Alicia. So now we're going to get into some questions. If we don't get to your question, reach back out to us. If it's from a licensing or account or sales type perspective, you can call us or email sales@esha.com. If you need some assistance with using the application, with any sort of issues with updating the application, or if you have any questions about the menu itself, you can reach out to support@esha.com, and support goes to our nutrition team as well. So they'll delegate that out to the correct person to answer it as well as we possibly can. And then obviously we have a lot of resources on our website, LinkedIn, blog, newsletter, our e-learning center, which I'm going to show you right now. Actually, I'll jump over to that before we get into the questions. Our e-learning center is a great tool. Inside of version 11.5 of Genesis, we've now added a button here that says e-learning center. If you click on that, and I'm not going to now because it's going to open up my web browser, but if you click on that now, you can actually it'll take you to the ESHA website, straight into the e-learning center to find any past webinars, ebooks, any of that sort of information. So any of those sorts of resources that are available. Now getting over into our questions, we got a few here. First question we've got, I've used the idea of composite ingredients, but using a recipe in Genesis. How is that different than the new composite ingredient feature in Genesis?
Sure, so the composite ingredient brings in equal amounts of each ingredient automatically. And if you're accomplishing the same concept by creating a recipe with the recipe features, you manually enter the amount of each item, each ingredient. So you select the amount that you bring in to a recipe. And it may be that you do use equal amounts in a recipe form of this approach, but the composite ingredient does it automatically.
And the composite ingredient has the nice new feature of being able to check and uncheck, which is a nice function too if you're ever going to be adding or removing suppliers. Question number 2, we use Genesis, but we're feeling a step behind in the menu labeling process. How can we get help?
We are here to help, but if you do need to get up to speed with Genesis, you might consider training. We have the general sessions, and again, we can also provide more customized training with a focus on the menu labeling. So you can contact our training team to discuss more options. They can be reached at training@esha.com. And we do have consulting services, so if you needed help with an organization plan, specific projects, or actually the analysis of any of your menu items, you can reach out to our consulting services at cs@esha.com.
Perfect. Next question, and I'll address this one. Are the additional nutrients on the menu label report rounded or unrounded? And I'll open that up so we can take a look at kind of what we mean here. In the menu label report, which is what I have currently open, if we uncheck that label nutrients only box, it's then going to show our nutrients to view. This will show rounded nutrients so long as there is an ability to round them. So all of the restaurant nutrients or the menu label nutrients will still be rounded. Any other nutrients will not. So, vitamin B1 is just showing its raw unrounded value, and my application has 6 decimal places showing, so it's going to show all 6 of those. Our next question, what if our number of locations has grown to over 20? Do we now have to include calories on our menu?
Well, first of all, congratulations on your growth. With greater distribution comes greater responsibility, right? So if you meet all of the conditions of a covered establishment, then you would need to comply with the menu labeling rules. The FDA guidance in our previous webinar lists exemptions, so you could take a look at the regulations, confirm your status, and check out the previous menu labeling webinar and to get the help that you're up to speed.
Perfect. Our next question, this one I'll address as well. Can you show me how to export the menu label? And there are a number of ways you can do that. I'll show a couple of quick ways, and then there's a few others outside of the Genesis software too. So if you wanted to just simply export the report, we're inside of the report now. We've got our menu that we built here. We click on menu label report. If we simply right click inside of this, we can do export report either to file, which will save a text file, which is delimited text if you're looking to open it into like a spreadsheet type layout, or you can export the report to your clipboard and then just paste it right into something like Excel to then be able to adjust as you go. If you want it in a PDF type format, you can just go into File, Print to PDF to print it, or Print to just print it to a physical sheet of paper. Or with our utilities, Alicia mentioned the Genesis API in the past. If you're wanting to build a report based on your items, you can use the API to pull data straight out into your digital reader board, your website. If you have another system that your data goes to before it goes into that, if you have like a PLM or ERP system that's kind of your staging ground for your data, there's obviously a lot of possibilities there depending on how big your company is, what exactly you do. Everyone has a slightly different variation to their software solutions, the dozens or hundreds of softwares you use as a business. So, but that's 2 great options. And then we have ESHA Port as well. And ESHA Port will be able to export data using a delimited text or CSV file. You can schedule that too. So if you wanted to export data, 1 menu, 20 menus, however much you want, into a text file and schedule that nightly, weekly, or just export it when you feel like you want it to be exported, you have that option in ESHA Port as well. And then I will stay inside of Genesis because we had one more question about the inside of the program. Can I show or hide the calorie ranges on the menu label and how? So by default, as I was creating these menus, this was something I meant to mention, but I just didn't get to. As you're creating these categories, it will show you the calorie range inside of the category. If you don't want it to show the range, we can go right click on the category name, hit modify item, and right where we had renamed the categories, right underneath that, there is the show calorie ranges. So if we uncheck that box, hit OK, it's now not going to show that range, and that's going to be individual for the specific categories, but obviously save as you close and reopen those menus. So the individual categories you can choose to show or not show those ranges. And then our last question here, what if I don't see composite ingredient features inside of Genesis? Or, as I think Alicia kind of mentioned a little while ago, what if you're still seeing the food menu, called the food menu instead of the menu label? You'll obviously see both those changes at the same time. The version that those were released in was version 11.5 of Genesis. If you're not sure what version of Genesis you're currently running, you can go to the Home tab here, click on that, which is what I have open right now, and then click on About. You'll also not see the e-learning center. So there's quite a few red flags to know if you've updated to version 11.5 or not. But if you click on About, and I won't now because of security purposes, it'll show my serial code, my customer number, a lot of information that we don't necessarily want to share here. But if you do click on that, it'll show you what version. If you are using the cloud version of Genesis, you have to be using the newest version. It's always up to date. But if you have it installed then we should have emailed out an update that you can install. If you have any questions about what version you're running, if you're interested in moving over to the cloud for easier updates, give our sales team a call and we can go through all of that information. With that said, we're going to let you go. I know we're a little later than expected. Thank you all for attending, and you have a great day.